Before we begin tonight's story, take a moment to look around you. Are you watching this alone in a dark room, or surrounded by familiar sounds that make you feel safe? Wherever you are in the world, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, because the story you're about to hear has a way of reaching far beyond the place where it began. This is not just a tale of an old house or a frightened family. It is a story that has survived centuries, retold in whispers, court records, and fading letters. Some call it America's first documented haunting. Others say it was something far older than a ghost. What follows is a single reconstructed account, told as a documentary, pieced together from folklore, testimony, and imagination, to explore one of the most disturbing legends ever born on American soil. In the early 1800s, the American frontier was a place of uncertainty. Vast forests swallowed roads overnight, and isolation was a fact of daily life. In what is now northern Tennessee, near the Red River, stood a modest homestead surrounded by dense woodland. The land was fertile, the air heavy with cicadas and unseen movement, and the nights were so dark that even familiar paths vanished after sunset. Families who lived here depended on faith, routine, and silence to survive. This was the world of the Bell family, respected settlers whose lives followed predictable rhythms of farming, prayer, and seasonal change. Nothing in their past suggested they would become the center of a mystery that would outlive them by centuries and stain the land with fear long after their house collapsed into dust. The first disturbance was small, almost laughable, and easy to dismiss. John Bell reportedly noticed strange animals on his property, dogs with unnatural proportions, birds that vanished when approached, and something that looked like a rabbit but moved like a man. At night, faint knocking echoed from the walls, as if fingers tapped patiently, testing the house for weakness. At first, the family blamed rodents, then wind, then imagination. Frontier life demanded practicality, and fear was a luxury few could afford. Yet the sounds grew more deliberate. Scratching followed patterns, moving from room to room. Whatever caused it seemed aware of the family's movements, retreating when confronted, returning when ignored, as if learning their habits and testing their resolve. Soon the disturbances became impossible to explain away. Blankets were pulled from beds in the dead of night, children were slapped by unseen hands, and whispers filled the air, too faint to understand but unmistakably intentional. The Bell children described something tugging their hair and pinching their skin, leaving no marks yet causing real pain. Elizabeth Bell, the youngest, became the primary target. She claimed something followed her constantly, standing just behind her shoulder, breathing without lungs. The family gathered for prayer, believing this was a test of faith, but the entity seemed to mock them. Hymns were interrupted by laughter. Bible verses were met with sudden silence, as though whatever listened understood every word being spoken. Neighbors were invited to witness the phenomena, partly to confirm the family was not losing its collective sanity. What they encountered left many shaken. Visitors reported hearing chains dragged across the floor, voices that spoke from empty corners, and blows delivered by nothing visible. The voice, when it chose to speak clearly, claimed intelligence and memory. It knew people's names, their past actions, and secrets never shared publicly. It referred to itself in the feminine, though it rejected any single identity. Some called it the Bell Witch, not because it fit traditional ideas of witchcraft, but because no other word seemed sufficient. It was not bound to a body, nor to silence, nor to fear, but it thrived on all three. What made the events truly horrifying was the entity's consistency. This was not chaos. It followed rules only it seemed to understand. It appeared more frequently at night, avoided bright firelight, and reacted violently to skepticism. Those who mocked it were struck or humiliated. Those who listened too closely were followed home by unexplained misfortune. The Bell Witch spoke of past lives, of the land before the Bells arrived, and of promises made and broken long ago. It claimed the land remembered everything. Trees, it said, never forget the blood spilled beneath their roots. Water never forgets the names spoken over it. The family began to suspect that the entity was not haunting the house, but the land itself. John Bell's health deteriorated rapidly. Once strong and methodical, he became weak, disoriented, and prone to long periods of silence. He claimed to feel something tightening around his throat at night, preventing him from speaking. At times, he seemed unable to move at all, as though pinned beneath an invisible weight. The entity mocked his condition openly, predicting his suffering with chilling accuracy. It claimed responsibility for his illness and promised it would not end naturally. Doctors were summoned, but no treatment helped. In a time when death was common, this felt different. It was not illness moving toward a conclusion. It was punishment unfolding according to an unseen schedule. The bell witch grew bolder as months passed. It sang songs, recited sermons, and engaged in long conversations with guests, sometimes arguing theology with ministers and correcting them. It displayed a disturbing moral logic, condemning certain actions while encouraging others. It showed particular hatred toward John Bell, accusing him of past injustices related to land dealings. Whether these accusations were true was never fully resolved, but the precision with which they were delivered shook those who heard them. This was not random malice. It was a narrative, carefully constructed, as if the entity believed itself an agent of balance rather than chaos, execution rather than accident. The climax came quietly. One morning, John Bell was found unconscious, unresponsive to all attempts to wake him. A small vial was discovered nearby, containing a dark liquid no one recognized. The entity announced that it had given Bell a dose while he slept, proudly declaring responsibility. When the liquid was tested on a cat, the animal died instantly. John Bell never regained consciousness. He died shortly after, his passing marked not by mourning alone, but by the chilling sound of the entity singing at his funeral. Witnesses claimed it celebrated, declaring its task complete. The idea that something unseen could kill a man and confess openly shattered any remaining sense of safety. After John Bell's death, the disturbances lessened, as if the entity had achieved a primary goal. It lingered, however, offering prophecies about future wars, inventions, and disasters. Some of these predictions, according to later retellings, seemed eerily accurate. Then, without warning, it announced its departure. It promised to return after a set number of years, though accounts differ on when that would be. The Bell family eventually left the property, unable to rebuild a sense of normalcy. The house fell into ruin, reclaimed by forest and silence. Yet the story did not fade. Travelers reported strange sounds near the site, animals refusing to pass through, and an oppressive feeling that lingered long after leaving the area. Over time, the Bell Witch transformed from a local terror into a national legend. Skeptics argued mass hysteria or elaborate deception. Believers pointed to the consistency of accounts across decades. What makes this story endure is not just fear, but documentation. Court testimonies, letters, and newspaper articles recorded the events, lending them an unusual weight. Unlike many ghost stories, this one refused to stay in the realm of fireside fiction. It demanded to be considered seriously, even by those who rejected supernatural explanations. The question was no longer whether something happened, but what kind of reality could allow it to happen at all. Modern interpretations suggest the Bell Witch may represent something older than a haunting spirit. Some folklorists argue it reflects Native American beliefs about land memory and retribution, distorted through settler fear and misunderstanding. Others see it as a psychological manifestation of guilt, projected outward into a narrative the community could process. Still others believe it was something entirely separate from human explanation, an intelligence rooted in place rather than person. The idea that land itself can become hostile challenges modern assumptions about ownership and control. It suggests that settling a place does not mean conquering it, and that some histories resist being buried. Visitors to the area today still report unease. Equipment fails without reason. Voices carry strangely through the trees. People speak of feeling watched, not by eyes, but by attention itself. Whether these experiences are influenced by expectation is impossible to prove. Yet folklore survives because it fills gaps that facts cannot. The Bell Witch endures not because it demands belief, but because it reflects a fear deeply woven into American history, the fear that the past is not finished with us, and that progress does not erase consequence. In this way, the story functions as both warning and mirror, forcing each generation to confront what it inherits along with the land. What remains most unsettling is the intelligence attributed to the entity. It was not driven solely by rage or confusion. It negotiated, judged, and remembered. It had preferences, rules, and patience. That challenges the comforting notion that evil is chaotic and mindless. Instead, the bell witch suggests something calculated, capable of waiting decades or centuries to act. In a country built rapidly on expansion, this idea strikes a nerve. It implies that history is not linear, that unresolved harm accumulates quietly until it finds expression. Whether supernatural or symbolic, the story insists that nothing truly disappears simply because time passes. As this reconstructed account draws to a close, the bell witch remains unresolved by design. Every version contradicts another in small ways, as if the story resists being pinned down. That uncertainty is its power. It invites belief without demanding it, fear without proof. It survives in the space between folklore and documentation, between imagination and record. Perhaps that is why it continues to be retold on modern platforms, reaching listeners far removed from the Red River. In sharing it, we participate in the same act as those early witnesses, acknowledging that some stories refuse to stay buried. And as long as they are told, the land, and whatever remembers through it, is never truly silent.